Welcome back, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service. Just before we bring in our guests to discuss the topic for the day, which is on Mr. President's diplomatic shuttle, let's take this background report put together for us by Oyemi Ajayi.
Foreign policy enables and facilitates the communication and cooperation between leaders of a country in the international system and helps to prevent and resolve the conflicts and disputes that arise amongst them. The three concentric circles of Nigeria's foreign policy has been commended by leaders, and on this note, the present administration, through Mr. President and other government leaders, frequently undertake international trips to strengthen diplomatic ties with other countries and establish relationships to attract investment opportunities. Similar to diplomats, these leaders travel abroad to strengthen international relations in areas such as peacekeeping, conflict resolution, trade, economic cooperation, cultural exchange, security collaborations, environmental matters, and human rights issues, amongst many others. During such visits, alliances are forged and treaties are signed, all aimed at safeguarding their nation's interest and building enduring partnerships that shape the foreign policy. The Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has participated in a variety of engagements, including summits, conferences, bilateral discussions, and ceremonial events such as inaugurations and independence celebration. Over time, he has interacted with heads of states and prominent business leaders from the host countries and across the world, giving him enough opportunity to promote Nigeria as a destination for global investments. Many have commended numerous diplomatic shuttle by the president, while emphasizing avalanche of benefits already being enjoyed. For instance, analysts say between the third quarter of 2023 and the second quarter of 2024, total capital importation from 12 out of 19 countries visited tripled, increasing from $412 million to $2.2 billion. Another notable outcome of President Tinubu's foreign trips is his roundtable with the leadership of the United Arab Emirates, which resulted in the immediate cessation of the visa ban placed on Nigerian travelers, prompting Etihad Airlines and Emirates Airlines to resume flight operations in Nigeria. Also, Nigeria became the ninth partner country of BRICS, an interstate association which comprised of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, with the president's presence at Dar es Salaam for the Africa Heads of State on Energy Summit, it is expected that more benefits will be achieved in favor of the country. Now, what more should be done to ensure that the average Nigerian begin to benefit from some of these gains? Our guest already seated will be answering these and more questions shortly.
Right. Thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background report. And seated here in the studio to get the conversation going, let me introduce first Ambassador Dr. Korede Martins, Diplomacy and Human Capital Development Expert. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be here.
Let me also welcome Ambassador Bolaji Akintemi, Director Trade and Investment at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for joining us.
Akinremi.
Oh, Akinremi.
Yes, I'm sure it's just the devil's error. Yes. All right. Your Excellency, thank you. We also have Dr. Adoye Matthew Omale, an international affairs analyst, and of course a very familiar face here on Good Morning Nigeria whenever we are talking international relations.
Good morning, Claire.
Good morning. Good to have you.
Yeah, good morning.
Good to have you. All right. Joining us via Zoom from the U.S., Ambassador Dauda Danladi, former Nigeria High Commissioner to Pakistan. Ambassador, good to see you. And how is Trump doing you there?
Thank you very much. Good morning. We are watching the unfolding governance of President Trump, the America First agenda.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Perhaps before we go into this conversation, Claire, you know that the withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is supposed to take effect today.
It takes effect today.
It takes effect today, but in the spirit of regional solidarity, I'm told that, and in the interest of the people, as well as the decision of the ECOWAS authority, they have decided to keep ECOWAS doors open, and all relevant authorities within and outside ECOWAS member states, to accord them certain open doors in the time being.
I think this letter is coming from, this release is coming from the ECOWAS, secretariat. So I'm sure it has the stamp and seal of the chairman himself, and of course the other. But let's start with Ambassador Akiremi. Tell us, what are your views? What do you think about this? And the clause, let's keep the doors yet open, even though the window for rapprochement has closed today.
Well, thank you so much. Well, this was announced in December when ECOWAS had a summit that the date will be today. And that should be like when it actually turned like 12 months, or there's a particular duration according to the ECOWAS treaty. And so it has fulfilled this, which means they gave the notice, and then the notice has come to pass. So whatever they have done before today, they were still member. But from today, they are no longer member. But one thing we must know about ECOWAS is that blood is thicker than water. The fact that we are all within the same geographical region links us together by blood. If we have an association or not, we will still relate, because we are just side by side of each other. If you cross to the boundary of Nigeria and Niger Republic, you will not know the difference.
Absolutely.
So it's not whether ECOWAS or no ECOWAS. These are the same family, the same people, the same thing in Benin Republic, the same elsewhere. But ECOWAS has provided a platform over 40 years that has been so strong and has become a model worldwide. It's recognized that even EU have learned a lot of lessons from ECOWAS. And so even for those, the AES, the Association of Sahel States, who have pulled out, will still continue to relate with ECOWAS. And that is the same spirit why, as a big brother, Nigeria is still keeping its door open, because they must be given that opportunity if they want to come back. Just like you want to give to any other person who wants to join ECOWAS also. It's just that they must be within that geographical location. So the fact that they are no longer in ECOWAS does not take them away from that geographical location.
Article 91, I've just checked, of the revised ECOWAS treaty sets out, that states wishing to withdraw must give to the executive secretary 1 year's notice in writing. And during that period, that member state must comply, with the provisions of the treaty. But we know that last year, exactly this time last year, in 2024, when, Mali, the three countries indicated they were withdrawing, I think one of them did say that, look, they were in a haste, so to speak, to leave. They were not waiting for that window to leave. But let us look at, Dr. Omali, let us look at what the exit, from ECOWAS, what does it imply on the authority and integrity of ECOWAS, as a regional bloc?
Well, the implication definitely is that even if it's one member that is leaving, it will have a serious impact, because the basic function of ECOWAS is to allow free movement of goods and persons across the sub-region, to boost trade, to boost interaction among the various countries. And especially now that three countries, large countries, and very, very significant part of ECOWAS, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, that are forming their own Sahel regional body. So it will have a lot of impact, definitely, because especially to a country like Nigeria, just like Ambassador has said, that has very, very close affinity with Niger Republic. And the impact will be felt more in the area of trade, because products that normally pass seamlessly, persons that normally pass seamlessly through these borders, they will now begin to have challenges. Probably they need visas, probably they need other incentives. Like he was saying, there's no way that the doors cannot be opened. The doors have to be opened. That that those countries are pulling out of ECOWAS does not mean that Nigeria will not relate with them. They are still part of the international community.
So what does it really mean? Because these are members that are also signatory to the protocols.
Yes.
Especially the trade liberalization,
Yes.
yes. So what really does it mean?
It means they are not
Yes.
part, they are no longer part of those.
They'll be fine. So,
yeah, they are no longer part of those treaties. The military alliances,
the treaty is not binding on them.
It's no longer binding on them. And like I said, even in terms of the major protocol, which is in terms of trade, in terms of free movement of persons, in terms of opening their borders to West African products, those things are no longer going to be there because they have opted out of the treaty. So all the benefits that normally accrue to members of the sub-region will be withdrawn. So it's a huge blow to ECOWAS. They are no longer going to contribute peacekeeping troops to peacekeeping operations. And this will also, because Mali has been a very, very important contributor to peacekeeping operations, ECOWAS peacekeeping
missions.
Yes, missions. So definitely it will have an impact. And even in terms of funding, 3 countries opting out, it will definitely have an impact on the funding. Though it's Nigeria that takes the chunk, but definitely they are contributing their own quota. And a country like Mali is not doing too bad, has also have its own fair share of contribution to the development of the sub-regional body. So I think the path that ECOWAS has told in terms of trying to see how this can be resolved, because there's still opportunity for it to be resolved. I think the major reason why they are opting out was the initial antagonism when this military coup took place in those countries. They felt that they should have been welcome. But you see, ECOWAS has a protocol on democracy and good governance, and all the countries willingly agreed to be part of that protocol. And with the undemocratic takeover of power, ECOWAS must be seen to live up to its responsibility of stopping military intervention in the sub-region, especially that democratic regime will now be under threat by those that are in control of instruments of coercion. If decisive steps were not taken against those countries, because it's now a pattern, from Mali to Burkina Faso, from Burkina Faso, like that to Guinea, and so ECOWAS need to say, look, this military interruption of democratic system must stop. And they all agreed ab initio. That is not to say that democratic regimes in Africa has lived up to its responsibility.
Exactly, because again, Dr. Korede, he talks on the protocol on good governance, which is very significant. The argument will be, successive leaders of, the ECOWAS have not done enough to activate, that aspect of the treaty, which would have guaranteed the people of these countries, the confidence and trust, in the body.
Well, let's take it from what Mr. President said, the Chairman ECOWAS Commission, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, while responding to the issue of those so-called pariah states that decided to leave, ECOWAS. He said we're going to handle the matter with wisdom and, of course, diplomacy. And I believe that what has happened, the decision of the ECOWAS as a body, is clear-cut, and it has to be done. Yes, we can say African governments have not done so much in terms of delivering the proverbial dividends of democracy, bringing about good governance. But the experience that we have in Nigeria currently, recently, given our immediate past experiences or experiences in the past, would allude to the fact that we are gradually getting it right. It's like Nigeria as a country beginning all over again to ensure that those foundations that we can build good governance upon, have been put in place by the current administration in Nigeria. So if other governments in Africa, in West Africa, are not doing so well, as far as Nigeria is concerned, currently, we are taking the right steps in the right direction, as being led by our government. So clear-cut decision by the ECOWAS Commission has to be done, has to be seen, which is like a stick and a carrot approach.
Honestly, I agree. I agree, and we will look at that. We will look at the wisdom in that. Given that this the countries have not taken the advantage of the 1-year window given to them to come back. But I don't know if Victor has a question. But let's get Ambassador Tandade's response to this issue. I'm just wondering if this is just an attempt by the three countries to whittle the powers of ECOWAS as a regional body, or is it a message that the countries are sending to ECOWAS, to reform, to look inwards and reform?
Well, I think you have to look at the geopolitical situation, which, of course, has increasingly become more complex and volatile. And at the same time, the actions of these three countries is a shift from where they were to Eastern Bloc. But we have too many bilateral engagements, too many bilateral agreements, and the implications are quite grave. The implication would affect the our regional security, the issue of integration, which ECOWAS have, for the past 40 years, made good progress. Other very serious, am I not audible? Yeah. So therefore, I think, as has been mentioned by my good friends, the ambassadors, I strongly believe that ECOWAS diplomatic action in giving olive branch to these countries, I do hope that in the long run, we will resolve this issue. This issue will be resolved. The regional implication is quite grave. As you know, we have treaties in the areas of water management, the Chad Basin Commissions. Nigeria is the major supplier, 60% supplies Niger's energy requirement. In the pipeline, there is this Sub-Sahara, Trans-Sahara gas pipeline, which will benefit most of these countries, that will transmit gas to Europe. And of course, these countries are all going to be beneficiaries. So I am hopeful that in the long run, even if it means coming out with another framework towards a peaceful disengagement for regional cooperation, I think it will go a long way in stabilizing some of the gray areas that has arisen as a result of the actions of these three countries.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Danladi. Let's get straight back into our conversation for today. And let me begin with Ambassador Akinremi.
Thank you.
The president has been up and about across, different parts of the world. We've seen some gains, some are potentials. What's your assessment of the diplomatic shuttles being carried out by the president, and what are their potentials for Nigeria? And the gains, have they been commensurate?
Yeah, thank you so much. The gains have been quite commensurate, and there is a way to view what Mr. President is doing. Number one, the president is number one foreign service officer. He is in diplomacy, is the epitome, is the symbol. And so he's doing what he's signed for. That's one. But you might say, does he have to go by himself? He's someone who likes to lead from the front. The other way to look at this is that these are on request. Most of the events that Mr. President have gone for were very important, significant to Nigeria. So his trips have been very purposeful. He came in May, and by June, he was in France. He was in Paris of 2023. By same June, he was in UK. By October again, he was there for different purposes that have to do with finance, that has to do with investment. And this has cut across the entire globe. In 2023, he was in India for the G20, which was the first time that Nigeria will be attended. Who will tell me that that is not significant? Or is it the last G20 in Brazil? Or even the next one? So all the trips of Mr. President are very purposeful. Now let's talk about the result. They are yielding beyond expectation, I will tell you. You must know where Nigeria is coming from, because the tendency is that we forget so easily. If you look at our investment bucket, we were at a very critical stage before this administration. Crisis has to do with security. There were a lot of distrust or lack of trust by investors. He needed to build all of this. And so you have to build the confidence of investors. There was the issue of inability to repatriate their profit or their funds. Many were being owned before he came in. He has paid all of this. So we've gained back the confidence of investors. Now, if you lay back at that point, they will see you as unserious. So you started from minus. It had a negative takeoff. Now it's at a very positive, high positive. The economy has rebounded, okay? And the assessment of the international community is that Nigeria is not just on the path of recovery. Nigeria is stabilizing. And so when you look at even our economy, microeconomy, you find a lot of policies that have built even citizens' confidence that they have a government that knows the direction and that knows what it's doing. And if you look at the number, there are a lot of international engagement that other stakeholders are doing on behalf of the nation. The Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs is taking his own part. Now the ministry has two ministers. Minister of State is on his own part. Foreign policy for Nigeria as the largest economy and the biggest in terms of population is a huge thing, because Nigeria has a natural role that it has to play, both to the black race, to Africa. You've just spoken about ECOWAS. So there is a lot naturally that is expected of Nigeria. And as number one, he has to
undertake it.
He has to lead this. And so others are doing, we as diplomats our missions in over 110 are doing equally. And so all of these are yielding results.
All right, Ambassador, thank you. We
Thank you.
will look at the specifics as we go on. Hopefully, Mr. President is number one diplomat. I mean, simply
Exactly.
put. So, but let's look at diplomatic shuttle. It's a concept in international relations, and it deals with the act of moving from one place to the other, to resolve. At the time, at the time it was tied to disputes resolution, and I'm sure we remember the person who made it popular by virtue of the journalists that accompanied him during his trips to Egypt. That was the U.S. Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. We remember that President Nixon wasn't interested, but Israel had asked for assistance to disengage from the Israel, Egyptian, and Syrian war. It was Kissinger that made the shuttle, to make that happen. So at the time, it was tied to, conflict resolution. But we know that, Dr. Omali, we know that diplomatic shuttle now has, broadened out and has its core, functions. Can you enlighten us on these core functions, and how does our president's diplomatic shuttle align with those functions?
Yes, thank you very much. You see, diplomatic shuttle is the movement forth and back of a diplomatic player by trying to resolve an issue. It must not necessarily be a conflict.
I just mentioned that because in the past, in international relations, we know it started as
but it has transformed to a more higher one.
Precisely.
Now, diplomacy is basically negotiations, being able to discuss and arrive at an agreement, and also to protect your national interests. Now, the diplomatic shuttle by Mr. President is to negotiate on behalf of all of us Nigerians, to be able to tell the outside world that we have a lot to offer, to be able to see how he can bring favorable terms in terms of trade and other aspects of international economic relations. And outside diplomatic shuttle, there is what is called personal diplomacy. Personal diplomacy basically is the involvement of high caliber officials in diplomatic shuttles. So president to president, prime minister to prime minister at that level.
At that level.
And so Mr. President is engaged in personal diplomacy. In fact, personal diplomacy is very important because at that level, you do not need any lower cadre diplomats. It's done at the level of the president of a country to another. And their negotiations are faster, their discussions are easily articulated and agreed upon. So we encourage personal. I heard the ambassador talking about, yes, we have diplomatic missions, we have embassies, we have a minister, but the president being directly involved as the chief diplomat, putting that personal interest into his diplomatic shuttle is very instructive. The results are faster. The doors open easily because it's at the highest level of interaction. And then closely related to diplomatic shuttle, personal diplomacy, is multilateral diplomacy. If you look at most of the travels by Mr. President, is to ensure that Nigeria takes its rightful place within the international system. Attending the G20 meeting is multilateral. ECOWAS is multilateral. Attending the FOCAC is multilateral. So if you look at even the one in Tanzania on energy, it's multilateral because they are trying to form a group to assist in developing the energy sector. So if you look at Mr. President's travel, it encompasses various aspects of diplomacy, whether shuttle, whether personal, or multilateral diplomacy. And some of them are even bilateral in nature, like the visit to France, the visit to India. and so on. They are all bilateral in nature. So Mr. President has been able to weave together various aspects of diplomacy for the interest of our country. And I think is very, very commendable.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. O'Malley. Let me get to Ambassador Martins. Now, from where you stand, what have been the gains, of this diplomatic shuttle? Is it the ones that we have already seen? Or do we have to be a bit more patient? How long does it usually take to reap the benefits of such diplomatic engagements?
Thank you. Now we are looking at the activities of Mr. President going around the various countries of the world in his diplomatic engagements. And we have seen what the gains, on the ground. He has discussed matters of trade, security, the environment, sports. At Abu Dhabi, there were 7 protocols, 7 agreements that were signed in Abu Dhabi that will ensure that Nigeria has that kind of relationship and various programs with UAE. And in South Korea also. The first one that we saw is that a $20 billion investment in the area of solid minerals, lithium production, is right here up and running between a place called Wassa down to the northernmost part of Nasarawa state as a lithium belt of Nigeria. All the mountains you see there are lithium in content, created by the Almighty Creator, and we've taken advantage of that. A lot of things are ongoing, as the case may be. We're looking at support for MSMEs, because I'm into entrepreneurship development, whereas the government has decided that over 3,000 MSMEs, the micro in the first instance, will be given support, single digit support. And this will not only be done by our finances, it has to also be done in terms of foreign investors coming in and ensuring that they put funds together to give support to all this. We are with the Director General of the Nigerian Education Students Loan Organization, and they discussed how much money they've supported thousands of Nigerian students so far in terms of paying off. All these are combined. In the area of the environment, Nigeria cannot stand alone. The environment in Nigeria has a lot of economic gains when it is supported by nations of the world. There's a lot to gain. Currently, we have the benefits, and going forward, benefits are also coming. We're not shouting Uhuru yet, but the signs are there. The practicality of the benefits, we are seeing them. And like I said earlier, Mr. President being Nigeria's ambassador plenipotentiary to the entire world is taking the right steps in the right direction, because no country can stand alone.
Dr. Korede, thank you. Ambassador Danladi, if you're still with us, diplomatic shuttles are undertaken in line with the country's foreign policy. And our foreign policy is anchored on 4 points, of course, of security, economy, friendly relations and peaceful coexistence, with the rest of the world order. We've started speaking on the economic prosperity aspect of our foreign policy, which Mr. President is driving through his diplomatic shuttle. Now, let's even begin with the most recent shuttle to Tanzania for the 300 missions. What do you make of it?
Well, I think, as has been mentioned by the panelists in the studio, the ambassadors, I think the president has taken the right step in the right direction towards boosting and attracting foreign direct investment. Yes, some critics, some pundits will say, what are the benefits? Why is the president shuttling? But if you look at just the past 18 months or so, that the president has been in the office, he has visited about slightly about 14 countries. Now, 14 countries, really, it does not even give the visibility required to interact robustly with world leaders, industrialists, to interact with the CEOs of the giant tech industries. So if you look at, again, possibly some will argue that why Nigeria is spending money on these foreign trips. You look at what was budgeted for the president in 2024. It's slightly just about, if you convert it to dollars, no more than $5 to $6 million. But within these 14 countries, yes, he has been to Asia, he has been to Europe, he was in the Middle East. If you take India, as has been mentioned earlier, India alone to attract an investment of about 14 billion US dollars in comparison with the expenditure, the cost-benefit analysis, $14 billion in India alone. And if you break it down, you see that the Indorama, which is a company that's operating in LMA, is investing about almost about 8 billion US dollars to expand its chemical and fertilizer plant in LMA in River State. That is an opportunity that will boost jobs and create a lot of opportunities for our youth to be carefully employed. If you look at the Jandil steel is coterminous with industrial development. And Jandil Steel of India, one of the leading steel industry in India, has put on the table 3 billion US dollars to develop the steel industry in Nigeria. Now, I can go on up to the Bharti Enterprise, which is a leading organization in telecommunication industry and digital solutions. That company is already investing about almost $700 million to boost telecommunication in Nigeria. If you move to Europe, Mr. President's effort in Europe, just to mention a few, ExxonMobil that exited, Exxon is coming back now. And ExxonMobil is put on the table, is injecting 10 billion US dollars to expand its deep water oil production. All right. The recent visit to France led to the signing of 2 major agreements, the critical infrastructure and the renewable energy. And at the same time, France has put on the table $300 million for investment in renewable energy. Now, the Middle East, as has been mentioned, Saudi Arabia just recently has announced that it will invest through its livestock industry. It will invest 1.2 billion US dollars in Olam organization in Nigeria. That will create abundant opportunity. So, in summary, I think Mr. President is doing the right thing. You can see what is happening in the United States. President Trump just took over office less than 2 weeks in office. He has attracted about 600 billion US dollars from Saudi Arabia as an investment, about 50% of GDP of Saudi's GDP. Yeah. He is threatening to impose tariffs on companies that will not come and produce and manufacture in the United States. And now, if the US is doing that, yes, I think give kudos to our president, let him continue.
Ambassador Dan,
position in the Nigerian economy.
Thank you. Trump has also asked them to raise it to $3 trillion. And I don't know how possible it will be for that country to do that. But thank you. I wanted to be specific. I wanted you to talk to us on, some people will say Tanzania, Mr. President again is going to Tanzania to attend the Africa Energy, Summit Mission 300, electrifying the country. And again, we've all agreed that diplomatic shuttles like this, outcomes, don't just, are not seen immediately. These are shuttles where MOUs are signed, agreements are signed, and these agreements, take time. They need to be, followed up. There's follows up to do. It takes a process before you begin to see tangible or visible, outcomes. But in terms of electricity generation, which is the essence of the African Energy Summit in Tanzania, what do you expect to see happen immediately now that Mr. President is back in the country?
Yes, my dear, you see, 200 million Africans have no access to electricity. 200 million. Now, this visit that Mr. President went to Tanzania, I have seen the report, and from all indication, he's leveraging on about 3.5 billion US dollars that were provided by the African Development Bank to boost electricity. And Mr. President, from the news I've gathered, is confident that in the next couple of years, about over 20 million Nigerians will have access to electricity. So it is a trip worth the benefits that are coming. Of course, it will take some time. But at the end of the day, what is required is that those that are saddled with the responsibility for ensuring the implementation of all these agreements do the needful, provide the enabling environment so that these projects, these investments becomes a reality to the benefit of all Nigerians that will boost our economy, improve the value of our currency, so that we will have the required sustainable development that will take Nigeria to the level that it's supposed to be, based on the potentials that we have in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Danladi. Let's get back here in the studio. And I'm just wondering, we've talked a lot about, the shuttles here and there and the potential benefits if they are not already here. But are there structures in place to monitor, and implement the agreements so reached at these diplomatic engagements? Yes, Ambassador Akinrebi.
Oh, thank you so much. There are structure on ground, and there are multifaceted structure on ground. Even starting with the Africa Energy Summit in Dar es Salaam, where Mr. President attended. Mr. President attended with the Honorable Minister of Power, and he superintended over the power challenge in Nigeria. And you will see that recently when America restituted the stolen fund, 50 million was dedicated, 50 million US dollar to rural electrification. That's to tell you the importance of power. This summit that I've just ended was a partnership between the UN, the Africa Development Bank, the AU, and some development partners. And this is very important to reach 300 million Africa. So the 300 there is they have in mind 300 Africa to have access to electricity. And that's to tell you that Africa of over 1.3 billion still has its huge population without electricity. Over the world now, there is a lot of avenue of generating power, energy, without necessary through electricity, the main which we are used to. There's a lot of renewable that goes around, but Africa is far, far behind. So since the days of Power Africa, and you will have seen Dr. Akinwumi Adesina there, because even his tenure is rounding up, he's still very much concerned that Africa cannot develop without power, without energy. So give it to Mr. President for deeming it fit to personally attend that, and you will see the huge number of heads of state that were there. I want to conclude by saying Mr. President is not frivolous. in his travels, and these are very targeted. Now, to your question on the issue of structure, it will be a aimless trip if you do not have what to contain it, the system, the structure with which you will continue. So they are very well thought of trips, and each of the MDAs have their role. But apart from that, there are multilateral instruments and multilateral arrangements that will monitor those things, that will evaluate, and will ensure that they deliver on their result. By the way, the international community is also monitoring. What is really important is that there are vision, there are purposes, there are goals that led into some of these things. And you tick the box as these things are being achieved, whether in terms of investment, whether in terms of economic development, whether in terms of technology. You'll see that each of the trips are targeted. That, for example, when Mr. President went to France, we had in mind technology. You know, you've heard of agreements signed in UAE, Sustainability Week. That was a great outcome. So if Mr. President goes anywhere, there are a retinue of officials that take that responsibility to ensure that the commitment he makes there are followed up in the foreign ministry, coordinating with other MDAs to ensure that what concerns them are given to them. So when Mr. President returned, everybody coordinated with the Chief of Staff to check the list. This is the purpose for which we went. What were we able to achieve? What are the steps we need to take going forward? So all of these are systematically managed. And this is where the foreign ministry comes in, because the mission in those countries also have roles to play.
Exactly.
You know, they will have to interface with the stakeholders in their host country. Oh, you have made this commitment. This is the timeline. We're expecting this. This is your counterpart in Nigeria. This is the contact. And we are here. If there are challenges, let us know. So they are in between. They give feedback to us. So the network we have is unimaginable. You know, Nigeria might not know this. You know, the Nigerian civil service has come of age. And over the time, we are the one that have stabilized the government. So there are a lot of systemic arrangement that make sure that these are not just jamboree. That they are not just jamboree.
It's quite interesting, you know, the process and structure that you have rolled out. Because my question to you would have been, because most times when, you know, these agreements or instruments are signed, you know, the perspective or the impression is that some of them, you know,
are in the shelf.
Yes, are in the shelf.
No.
You know, they are not, even the content, you know, we do not quite, you know, understand. I'm just looking for the right word now, diplomatic word now. Understand the content of the agreements we signed, and therefore, you know, because we do not understand, we cannot implement them. They end up in the shelf. So.
No.
Yes. So
let me enlighten
in the missions. Yes.
Yeah.
What are your specific duties to ensure that all the agreements signed, you know, are not just mere, you know, pen on paper?
Let me say a little here. In treaty making, there are a lot of MDAs that are involved. The originating MDA, for example, the currency swap with China was the baby of the CBN. But the CBN could have done this without the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, understanding, without Ministry of Justice. So there was an interministerial process that looked into this before the time, consider the nitty-gritty and the pros and cons for Nigeria and what benefits are there for us. After then, it is now authorized that it could go out. It is endorsed. And then you check with your counterpart, both agree we can negotiate this. Not all the times that it comes exactly the way it is taken out, but when it comes back, there are a lot of content that you have put in that comes back. Okay? Look at, for example, the Shell peanut agreement we have with China. during FOCAC. The Nigeria Agricultural Quarantine Service is following that up. That is a whole lot of economic gain for Nigeria that our peanuts can now get into Chinese market. We are looking at the same thing for aquatic elements, where we are talking in terms of aquatic products to be able to have access into China. We are doing the same thing with South Africa. Now, what we must understand is that when you are negotiating this document, we also take inputs from the private sector. As you know, the Africa Free Continental Free Trade had a challenge because the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria had an issue to clear.
Yes.
And so it is not just the civil servants alone, and it is not that the content I've had from. We even contact the academia, the civil society. All of these have inputs. And when it comes back, there is a debriefing session, which says, what did we take there? What was agreed to? And how can we manage what we have signed? That is the ratification process. When you sign an agreement with any country, it doesn't just go into implementation. It comes back, and then it goes to the National Assembly, and then it gets to Mr. President's table, and is signed. It is then it enters into implementation.
For instance, the agreement signed by the Minister of Health on maternal health, with the WEP.
Yeah.
Now that agreement has been signed. What's the next process?
It is a ratification. Now, we must understand there is MOU, there is agreement. Most of the MOU does not go through the shrewd and strict process of ratification. They are what you call gentleman agreement. So you've seen the content, it's okay by you, it's the best endeavor, and then you agree to go with it. But if it is an agreement that is, in the real sense of it, is negotiated, and it has, legal implication, this has to be ratified. And usually, it is in the agreement itself how it will enter into force, the competent authority. All of this has spelled out in the agreement, then it is signed. The Constitution empowered the Minister of Foreign Affairs, allowing Mr. President to sign. Any other person who signs such an agreement, we have to sign with full power of attorney, signed by the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, before they could sign on behalf of Nigeria.
All right, Ambassador Akirab, it's interesting to go into the nitty-gritty of all of this. We will have to pause here to take a break, and when we return, I would like to take on the issues of tracking, transparency, and accountability in all of this. Please stay with us. The conversation continues after now.
Well, creativity is so broad. I would say whatever it is that you're creative about, it takes a lot of practice before you become very good. So if it's something you intend to pursue, it's something you have to keep doing. You have to keep practicing. It's not going to be an overnight success, which a lot of people look for. But if it's something you're determined about, but the drawback rather, is that you need what is called staying power. While you're developing your creativity, you need to earn a living. So I know that's where the conflict usually comes in, especially with the hardship in the country and all that. But I think a lot of encouragement from the private sector to create incubator hubs. We've had some of those in tech. We need those across various sectors as well. Incubator hubs where these ideas can come in, be developed, be encouraged, be funded, and then we can expand it from there.
Content creation, while it may sometimes get a bad rap, I think it's actually very important because we have to see ourselves. We have to see ourselves living our lives. We have to show and share our stories. I think that's very important. Now, the job after that is to be able to digitize those stories into something that can provide data and insights, that can ensure that we can be able to support whole-scale industry in these spaces, to ensure that the amount of money that each content creator is getting exceeds what is currently happening for many content creators. The same content creator who lives in Nigeria will be earning less than a content creator who's living in the US or the UK or Japan. And we've got to also bridge that gap, because most of that is being driven by the ability of the consumers to pay for those goods, and also the pricing that many of these platforms have. So I think this is not the job for the content creators and the young people. This is a job for people like myself in the ecosystem who can help support the right pricing, to advocate for the right policies, to support economic development for consumers who want to consume that information and that content. And even beyond content creation, we're seeing that many people are stepping in behind the camera. They are producers, editorial, they are graphic designers, they are in technology, but maybe not in front of the camera. And what we want to say is also, we need those people too. We need those stakeholders involved. And the job of many policymakers, DFIs, is to ensure that the strategic investments get there, the collaboration gets there, and we're deliberate in how we're saying we want to support innovation in our continent.
There's an age group where your brain function is at its maximum, and that's the age group we call the youth, isn't it? So we need the youth, the younger generation, who have the energy, the imagination to be equipped with the proper education, the proper tools, the proper encouragement, and then take what innovation they bring out and turn it into mainstream developmental ideas. So you find a lot of things that are invented by people in school or straight out of school. We need our patent laws to work so that they can earn a living from their imagination. Once the imagination is just for a one-year festival or an event, then it's not worth it. Somebody creates something, we need to get our patent laws to work, we need to enforce them, and then the private sector can use those patents to develop things and encourage more people to be more creative. Back in the days, yes, you had to be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor. Today we have programmers, we have AI specialists, we have people that are doing ethics on genetics. Those things didn't exist 50 years ago. So there are new areas that need to be explored. The question really, apart from the parenting, does our educational curriculum cater for what the needs of the world will be in the next generation? Because our curriculum is dealing with the issues of the past. We need the government and the private sector to redo the entire educational curriculum to be forward-focused, not retroactive.
This Sunday, live on Sporty TV. Osasuna versus Real Sociedad. Watch live on Sporty TV.
Sportybet, sponsors of the
Spanish La Liga. This Sunday, live on Sporty TV. Roma.
This is Paulo Dybala. Offloads El Shaarawy.
Napoli.
McTominay.
Roma versus Napoli. Live on Sporty TV.
Sportybet sponsors coverage of the Italian Serie A.
All right, many thanks for staying with us. This is Good Morning Nigeria if you've just joined us, and we have been discussing the gains of the president's diplomatic shuttles across the world. And just before we went on that break, I was hinting, Ambassador Martins, if there are mechanisms in place to ensure transparency and accountability in tracking the gains of these diplomatic engagements.
Mechanisms
Yes.
being put in place by government has been expatiated by the Ambassador Akinremi. My own point of view is this. Government will always come up with policies Mr. President will always embark on diplomatic engagements to bring in, good governance, protocols, agreements, and then there will be those projects on ground for us to see. We are saying to the fact that, yes, there are projects on ground, benefits derivable and being derived from these foreign engagements by Mr. President. And we're taking it to other programs, other projects, other policies of government. Most importantly, we need to speak to those who are saddled with the responsibility to ensuring implementation of government policies. They must ensure that two factors are put in place in their minds while ensuring that these policies are brought to bear to Nigerians. Government will always do what they want to do and say, okay, go ahead and implement. One is integrity. Integrity, which has to do with doing the right thing and saying the right thing at all times, must come to play. We can sign all the agreements, we can speak all the grammar that we know in this world. Whereas, if integrity is not in place, it will just be a watershed at the end of the day. Concerns will be raised here and there. The second pivotal stand is patriotism, love for the country. Nigeria first before any other consideration. If you love Nigeria as a country and you have the responsibility to bring to bear the policies of government, you ensure that you are patriotic and you don't do otherwise, as the case may be. Once we have integrity and patriotism guiding us to implement government's policies, then we're sure that the sustainability of Nigeria, will be guaranteed as a people. So that will just be my counsel, because it is human beings that will implement these policies. Government will always have committees, we have the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, for example. We have, an office, the presidency, of a lady, a lawyer, that takes care of, auditing and reporting back what those who are appointed by Mr. President, like ministers, heads of MDAs, per time. They always have their meetings. But that is not enough. It has to do with the person. Those in the hierarchy, the higher rung of the civil service, starting with our director here seated, to the permanent secretaries, to the officers, they ask to implement these policies. If we get it right in the areas of integrity and patriotism, then Nigeria will be the best for it. Because we ain't got no other country but the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Yes, Dr. Mali, you will respond. Part of what he has said. If you recall, I asked the ambassador, why some of the treaties, we sign are not implemented or are implemented, in part. And I'm just sharing the opinion of some Nigerians who would ask, okay, Mr. President has done his part. Let's take, for instance, when Mr. President went to Qatar, he came back and promised, that he was going to unlock, the Qatari investment destined to Nigerians. And we're wondering, has that happened? We're also looking at the, the Emirates Airlines resumed operations, of course, following a long, process of resolution of the, issues that prevented that. Now, Emirates is flying Nigeria. Why aren't other, Nigerian carriers flying to Emirates? So all of these, there are, other issues, other agreements that have been signed that we, Nigerians haven't seen take effect.
Yeah, thank you, Claire.
Is it also integrity? Is it also patriotism?
Thank you, Claire. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, and you have asked me the same question. Well, I'm not a civil servant like the director, so he's been very mild, and of course he is a diplomat, so he has said what he wanted to say in a very diplomatic way. But we as academics, the truth of the matter is that the issue of integrity he has talked about is all about the mismanagement and corruption of foreign aids, foreign investment and donation by successive regimes in the country. Why we say that is that from 1999, even if we take from 1999, there have been quantum of foreign donations, foreign support by the World Bank, by the African Development Bank, by several international bodies. But I think the question Nigerians are asking is the impact of these foreign loans, foreign investment, and that is why he is talking about the issue of integrity and prudent management of these resources. Then also there's this issue of unequal treaties. For example, the example you gave about Emirates has started coming to Nigeria, but our own domestic airlines are not going. So some treaties are really unequal. And that brings to the issue he also raised about putting Nigeria first in most of these agreements. Are these agreements really negotiated? Are they really in tandem with our quest to have our independence, to have the best out of whatever agreement we're entering into with whatever parties? Most times we hear 1.2 billion is being thrown into power sector, but we don't see the power. We don't normally see the impact of this huge, humongous amount of money that is being thrown in. 1.2 billion signed for livestock, so billion thrown into the health sector, and we are not seeing the commensurate impact of this huge amount that is being invested by the World Bank. In fact, in the last 20 years, the World Bank has invested a lot of money in our power sector. But unfortunately, we are still where we are. There are some improvements, but we are still where we are.
So who is to blame?
Yes, that is why he's talking about the issue of integrity. Like, the president has done his best. He has gone and
individuals will implement.
Then the implementers. That is where the key. Unfortunately, the ministry, the directors, permanent secretary, as
the missions as well. I know.
All right.
And the politicians.
Yes.
Dr. Mali.
Hold on. Yes. Who is come down? I mean, let's know who. Let's know who.
Yes.
Yes.
You see, when these things are negotiated, just like he said, the treaties are ratified, and then when it comes to implementation, it is the line ministry. If it's in terms of health, it is the Ministry of Health that will that will liaise with the donating agency or the partners that are coming in, that are bringing the investment. It's at that stage. I have seen borehole dug by foreign donors that just work for barely 3-4 weeks and it packs up. Yes, in villages. I have seen health facilities that are built, and within a short period of time, the buildings are deteriorate so fast. I've even seen primary schools renovated that after a rainy season, the roofs are blown up. So these are issues that the president cannot be everywhere. There are people that were supposed to hold the engineers, that are supposed to hold
accountable.
Those people accountable, and that is where the issue of integrity in the implementation of this policy comes in. I don't want to talk too much on the issue of unequal treaties. There have been a lot of unequal treaties between Nigeria and several countries because of the way we, at times, I'm sorry to say, we compromise a lot of our the interests of our country.
All right, Dr. Mali, thank you very much. Let me quickly get to Ambassador Dan Ladi, who's joined us via Zoom. Ambassador, in light of the last two comments that we have taken, are there usually timelines, set for realization of these the contents of these engagements, the contents of agreements that are signed?
I think I just want to add the issue of ensuring the implementation of this agreement. I think, of course, there are timelines attached to some of these agreements, but I think, most importantly, I think we should adopt some strategies. One, there should be public disclosure the text of these agreements should be made available. If any organization wants to know what has been signed in the areas of power, for example, this information should be made available. Secondly, there should be periodic progress report. There should be the ministerial briefing. For example, if there is a bilateral agreement that has been signed in the areas of agriculture, the agriculture minister or the information officer of that ministry should periodically come out to give progress report on the implementation of such agreement. Again, the other aspect is to have stakeholder engagement. Those people all relevant stakeholders must be engaged. They must be made aware. They must know what are the challenges, what are the gray areas, and with that, again, it will ensure that these agreements are implemented. Again, the director, my colleague, the ambassador, has mentioned the issue of ratification, which means these agreements have to go through parliamentary oversight. And in that case, the parliament also would be able to carry out oversight to ensure that these agreements are implemented. The other aspect is the press. The press must have access to some of the progress that has been made with respect to some of these agreements. And they must ask questions. They must ask questions. They must go to relevant organizations, give Nigeria information on the progress of some of these bilateral agreements that have been signed, what has been done, what has not been done, what are the challenges. Again, I will talk about having an open database, and I think that should be available at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This open database will provide information, comprehensive information on all the bilateral agreements that have been signed, the levels of implementation, progress has been made, those that are about to be completed, those that have been stultified due to one or two other reasons. So if we are able to adopt these strategies to ensure that and hold the institutions saddled with the responsibility of maintaining these agreements, I think we will see the light at the end of the tunnel.
All right, Ambassador, thank you. Let's also look at, what has happened in the area of security, because that's the first on the, 4-point agenda on our foreign policy. Though our focus is still, Afrocentric, but the first on that agenda is security. And we've seen quite some improvement lately in terms of, security issues within parts of the country. And I'm wondering, Ambassador, can you attribute this to probably Mr. President's, trips, especially to China? I remember he went to China in the company of the defense minister.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. And I must tell you that this meeting has been going on very smoothly. Thank for your coordination and anchoring. And I'm glad that we are being able to share our views. Indeed, our constitution prioritizes territorial integrity as the focus and objective for our foreign policy. And which means each trip that Mr. President takes, this is behind his mind. Every investor is also interested in the security architecture of the place they want to invest in. And so they have to balance things. Our view have always been whatever challenges we have present opportunity to investor. And even in our security, there's room for partnership and investment opportunity. Nigeria has a compelling environment. Despite the challenges in security, investors still find Nigeria a place to come. We often emphasize or overrate Nigeria's insecurity. every country over the world have their own challenges with security. There is a possibility of being attacked faster in the city of New York than in Abuja. And you will see when you fly to Nigeria recently that there are more expatriates, foreigners in our aircrafts landing in Nigeria because of Mr. President's efforts reaching out to investors. We are so confident that it will keep improving because the military are doing their best, and you can see the result that we are hearing from the Chief of Defense Staff and from those community. And the international community are following. But I wanted to say something about data integrity and all of those things. It is always very easy to point the accusing finger to civil servants, but these are people really stabilizing our country. We have the repository of all agreements signed with the Ministry of Justice. It comes through also, we keep copies, but if anyone is interested, it can be found in the Ministry of Justice. So we have a list, and as has been mentioned, the National Assembly keep a tab on whatever goes on in agreement with Nigeria. And so it's also open to the to our citizenry. Our public opinion is always very active in Nigeria. But we are encouraging Nigerians to be more interested in international beyond criticisms.
All right. Thank you.
Is that a pause?
Okay, just because we are running out of time.
Oh, okay. So the thing here is that you've taken a very important topic, evaluating Mr. President's visit. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has said clearly on Channels Television that the President should do more of these travels. And he said this based on the gains that we have seen. And so I'm reiterating this, that we are all pleading that Mr. President should take more of these trips. And we pray that he has more strength.
All right.
And you see, this is an evidence that is healthy and that is strong. Okay. And if you take this against the backdrop of when he was coming into power, all kinds of political statements. There are people who are still bringing politics into governance, whereby they do all kinds of criticisms of everything that government does.
All right,
I think he deserves the credit at this time, and we give it to him. That is a performing president.
All right, thank you very much. Let me quickly get to Dr. Mali in a minute. I'm just wondering how government should ensure local participation in any foreign funded projects across the country. How should government ensure local participation?
Well, we talk about local content development. Instead of using expatriates, using foreign companies and all these things that the foreign donor, they bring a lot of conditionalities before some of this support or some of this foreign investment comes in. I agree that using the local content is also very key in achieving success or in the implementation of these programs, because involving expatriates or foreigners may not necessarily translate to quality work, because the local people who understand the terrain, who understand, and because they also need to be patriotic in the implementation of these programs. So I think that for every foreign investment or foreign aid that is coming into the country, there's need to involve the locals. There's need to involve local companies. There's need to involve local entrepreneurs, local private sector to be involved, so as to ensure that we maximize the benefit of this foreign investment.
All right. Dr. Adoyi Matthew Mali, International Affairs Analyst. It's been a pleasure, as always, having you join us on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you very much for your time.
Always my pleasure.
And your perspectives. Let me also thank Ambassador Dr. Korede Martins, a diplomacy and human capital development expert. We thank you for your contributions to the program.
I appreciate you. Nigeria is ours.
All right, and many thanks to Ambassador Bolaji Akinremi, Director, Trade and Investment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
And let me also thank Ambassador Dauda Danladi, who's joined us via Zoom from the United States of America. He is a former Nigeria High Commissioner to Pakistan. Thank you very much for your time on the program. We appreciate your contributions.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you again tomorrow when we bring you another episode of the program. I am Victor, as we'll see you again.
Bye-bye.